Is it on?
No.
As you know, I believe that computers make work rather than alleviate it. But I agreed to install one in the office on a trial basis because
It came in an elegant black.
Hugh discovered that people, I don't know who these people are or why they don't have more important things to do with their lives, but people have been publishing whole Salinger stories on their personal e-webs.
Weblogs.
Weblogs, ridiculous. This is blatant copyright infringement, and we are going to have to scour the World Wide Web to put an end to it. And that is all the computer is to be used for.
Sorry to interrupt.
Just passing through. Don't mean to cause a fuss.
And that was a clip from My New York Year, which is out in cinemas May 21st. One of its stars is the one and only Sigourney Weaver as New York literary agent. Sigourney joins us now. Hello, Sigourney. Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm very well. How are you, Simon? It's so good to be talking to England.
Well, England and Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland as well, just to put it in the right.
I hadn't finished my sentence. I was going to add all those wonderful countries.
Very good. Can I just say, before we actually talk about My New York Year, which is also called My Salinger Year, but you can explain on that, before we kind of run out of time, I just want to say that Call My Agent was one of my discoveries of lockdown. You know, when you sit down and you just binge watch stuff. And I don't think I've watched a French comedy show ever before. And then you're in it. And it was utterly delightful from start to finish.
Oh, I'm so glad. It was so much fun to do, to work with that wonderful ensemble and to get a dance number. My God, it's every actor's dream.
Were you allowed to improvise? I mean, it feels as though it's so dense and tightly scripted that you have to stick to what you're told.
No, I think there are definitely some improvisations. Like, for instance, when I say to Camille Cotin, I'm saying it's boring, so I say it's chien. And she says, this is chien, pointing to the dog. You're saying chien, you know? So, of course, they're so talented. And my French was good enough to sort of roll with it. And that was one of the joys, was we were kind of making up things as we went along.
Yeah, well, I certainly learned a lot of French swearing. That's one of the things that came out of it. Anyway, you're not here to talk about Call My Agent, which is 10 Passants in the original French. Let's talk about a movie which I think we're calling My New York Year, but is also My Salinger Year. Is it Salinger in the States?
No, it's My New York Year in England and a few other places.
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
Yes, of course. Those.
So tell us about the story. So this comes from a book which is called My Salinger Year, which came out in 2014. Tell us what the story is, Sigourney, here and where your character fits in.
So Joanna Rakoff, who is the writer of the book, My Salinger Year, came to New York, and she got a job working at a very old-fashioned literary agency that represented the most amazing writers. Like, you know, in the past, William Faulkner and F. Scott Fitzgerald and Agatha Christie, and currently represents J.D. Salinger, who my character, Margaret, calls Jerry. And my character, Margaret, does not really welcome any technology in her office. She has one computer that she doesn't allow anyone to touch without her permission. You know, it's very much a kind of homage to the days in New York where literature was the most interesting thing going on, and that celebrities were like Norman Mailer and, you know, and Joseph Heller and Kurt Vonnegut. And it was all about creation and it wasn't about business then, wasn't really about success. It was all about this amazing world. And my character, Margaret, is sort of a creature of those years and, you know, dressed to the nines and smoking and drinking her way through life. And, you know, and I think what's interesting about her to me is she's trying to hold up this world that's disappearing. And so, yes, perhaps she's formidable, but I think it's because she's trying to keep things standing as they are, which is always a hard job. And I'm glad the movie, Philippe's movie, takes us through so much of the story between Joanna and Margaret that you get to see their mentoring relationship and where they end up. I think in a way, being around Margaret helps Joanna make that decision to concentrate on her own writing.
Yes, the Philippe you mentioned is Philippe Falardeau, who's the director. Just on the character that you play, Sigourney, because she is, in fact, she's described in the. Someone calls her a monster, but she absolutely isn't that. I mean, brusque and traditional certainly, but as the movie progresses, we become sort of aware of her weaknesses as well.
Yes, I think that's true. I think she's hiding a lot of, when when she lets Joanna into this world, she's taking a huge chance that Joanna will be the kind of person who can embrace the philosophy, who will go along with her kind of strange compulsion to follow everything J.D. Salinger says and never let him see a fan letter. And so Joanna, wonderfully played by Margaret Qualley, takes on these jobs. And it's this marvelous story of this strange group of people, sort of keeping J.D. Salinger wrapped in cotton, as it were.
Mm.
His voice comes in and out, but it's just fascinating how protective they are of their main client who's still alive.
I was thinking, watching it, the way the film treats J.D. Salinger, it reminded me of some of the old 1950s, I guess, Hollywood movies about Jesus Christ, that he's filmed. You never see him properly. He's
so
kind
true.
of silhouette. He's kind of out of focus. And then there's a moment where he comes out of your office, but we don't actually see him, which kind of accentuates the fact that he's sort of like this godlike person.
Yeah. No, I remember all those movies. It was always like, oh, I'm glad I didn't see him, but still it was really frustrating. No, I thought that was very clever. And I love how Philippe allows you to see the fans themselves, who are all from different walks of life and, different ages, and see their sort of, heartfelt writings to this author, telling him how much his stories mean to them. I mean, I, for one, always identify in the movie, I always identify with the fans because I've always felt that way about literature. And I think over the lockdown, I think those of us who love to read have gone back to reading and actually maybe been able to finish a book. It's sort of great that the movie is coming out now, where maybe books mean more to people than they did a year ago, because people just don't have time to sit with a book.
Is it mid-90s? Is it like 94, 95? Is that where it's set?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing that dates a movie more than, because a lot of it feels very contemporary. The conversation is contemporary. Then you see the computer that they're operating and you think, oh, okay, no, this is very much another era. And yet the fact that J.D. Salinger is still with us and we've got this contemporary feeling story, and yet it's a love letter to a lost world. It's a very interesting time and place before the internet, before the mobile phone. So it manages to feel quite modern and yet somehow feel like from another era altogether.
Well, Margaret would be so happy to hear you say that, because she's trying to keep the digital world at bay. And I do think that it is, in a way, nostalgic for that word. And I know that Philippe, as a writer, had written letters to some of the filmmakers he admired, and some of them had written him back. So I think that his choice to include them, and partially to tell this story of an artist who decides he doesn't want to be in contact, and lifting up the fans who yearn for that contact, I think it's just a wonderful original movie.
And I know this isn't the question that the movie is setting out to answer, but did you get any closer to understanding why J.D. Salinger wanted to have absolutely no contact with any of his fans at all, or to have any sort of correspondence with them?
I'm still a bit puzzled by it myself. And, Margaret can't pretend that he's keeping himself fresh for a book he's writing. She knows that he's not. But I think that her respect for him and love for him is so great. I know she spent every Thanksgiving up at his house. And I know that when he actually passed away, the person who Margaret is based on, it was a huge blow. But why he's that way in people's hearts, I think it depends. I think it's true more for boys than girls, but I think you read him at a certain age, and the writing is so unique and alive and so real and so contemporary. And when I started to read him a bit at my advanced age, I found there were all kinds of things to discover that I really loved. I was more of a Fitzgerald girl myself, so I sort of dipped into Salinger. And frankly, Thomas Hardy was We read every book of Thomas Hardy's in high school. And so J.D. Salinger is very different from those guys.
Did you have any experience going back a few decades? Did you have any experience of that world of New York publishing, which this movie is very much a
Yeah.
look?
Well, I lived in a part of town where all the agencies were, and you could, see these guys having lunches. They weren't the business lunches. They were, writers hanging out and agents, and it was all very exciting. So I kind of remember that world, and I remember these amazing women, and what a force they were. And these career women, and it's very powerful and very focused, very good at their jobs, and especially good at a job like protecting a writer who wants to disappear. It's his choice. It is odd, though, because you like Salinger for encouraging Joanna's own writing. He's very perceptive about her, even on the phone, and advises her to, you're a poet, not a secretary, Joanna, he says. So right under my nose is Margaret. He's sending her away to be a writer. But it's a funny thing. I have mixed feelings about J.D. Salinger because I feel like one of his fans. I'm a fan of so many other writers, and he doesn't seem to care. Or I'm still figuring that one out. I'm afraid, Simon.
Yeah. No, and I think a lot of people will finish the movie feeling exactly the same way. Fans of yours, Sigourney, I think will smile or maybe laugh out loud at the extent of your technophobia, or your character's technophobia in this, as you struggle. In fact, you don't want a computer at all, but then you reluctantly agree for there to be sort of one computer in the office, because anyone who will have seen Galaxy Quest will be remembering your line when you basically say, I have one job on this ship, and that's to talk to the computer. So we know you know this stuff.
Well, I'm a bit of a Luddite. I mean, I've learned a lot during the lockdown of how to do a Zoom and how to set up lights. And, I'm so grateful for all the wonderful people I work with who make all this work, and having to do each of those jobs myself and somehow pull it off has been daunting, to say the least.
How will your industry, Sigourney, emerge from lockdown, whenever it is? And obviously all the cinemas are hoping to be reopening fairly shortly, but whatever happens, how do you think your industry will emerge? Will things have changed very much?
It's a good question. I think we're all buoyed up by the fact that in England, you've continued making films and television shows in spite of how difficult it is with COVID. I know they have in New Zealand too, and perhaps in Australia. I think it'll be very liberating when we don't have to use all of the mask and everything else. Apparently, it's just tremendously difficult. I'm starting a movie next month, and I'll be very curious to see whether they put us in a pod or if everyone will be vaccinated or how they're going to do it. It's a very low budget movie, and it's very expensive to add all these precautions. But we have to keep going. I think, for me, I was so glad that Salinger Year was going to come out, because I think that people need wonderful stories to watch right now. We're almost at the end, but we still may have quite a ways to go. And I think that Salinger Year will certainly take people into another time and into another world with this wonderful ensemble. And Margaret, of course, is just radiant throughout and is just the most wonderful person. And we get caught up in her story. And I think we've all been the young person trying to figure out which way is right for us and when are you going to do it.
My New York Year comes out on May 21st. Sigourney Weaver, thank you so much for speaking to us. Thank you.
My pleasure, Simon. Take care.